Hello, this is Dyer from Divergence Analysis. Today we are looking at the DVAN SmartLines package available on the TradeStation Trading App Store. Wanted to go over today's trading and possible setups on the E-mini S&P futures contract. This is a very popular chart setup with the DVAN SmartLines system, 5-minute, 15-minute, and 60-minute. You can also trade quicker or longer time frames, also range bars, Renko bars, tick bars, volume. But this is a very popular setup, and I was actually on the phone with a client, a user of the system, when some of these setups were happening in particular, so I wanted to reiterate what we went over and show how, one, we approach the day's trading, two, we look for entries and confirmations using the system. So once again, a 5-minute, 15-minute, and 60-minute chart, November 17th. Entering the day, I have this box. This is an hourly chart. I have the box of the actual day session in rectangular box right here, so you can kind of see this is the overnight session with it's quiet. But going into the day, the 9 o'clock hour to the 10 o'clock hour, so the market opens at 9:30. We see the formation of a buying cycle. The green shading that you see here, green shading on the 15 and the 5-minute as well. What we also notice is the long-term trend, which is also included in the DVAN SmartLines package on all three of the time frames is up. That means in a longer term fashion, we expect prices to move bullishly. So our main trend determinants are going to be the cycle and the long-term trend. The way we would look at this is entering the day, we have a bullish stance. Looking at a 15-minute chart, right at the open, this is 9:30, you can see the 15-minute also went bullish. We also converged into a buying cycle, so you see prices closing above the cycle and the green shading ensuing, meaning we're in a buy cycle. That would give us reasons to look for long trades with either a 5 or a 15-minute chart. I also have the DVAN pressure and DVAN velocity signals indicators included here. The velocity signals indicators are these green and red dots that show potential entry points using a velocity-based algorithm, and the DVAN pressure paints price bars based on buying or selling pressure. Green means buying pressure, red means selling pressure. So going into the day, because we see the longer term bullish nature as identified by the long-term trend and the conversion into a buying cycle on the 15-minute and the 60-minute chart, we'd be interested in long trades. Taking the trade at 9 a.m. for instance, we see everything that we want to see on a 5-minute basis to confirm an entry into a long trade. We see prices closing above the cycle, above the pivot line especially, which is the blue line running through the cycle and the main point of support and resistance. We see the short-term trend, which we haven't talked about yet, but this is the main short-term trend, the histogram color, and then the leading line is showing when the force is really picking up in one direction or another when it closes above or below zero. So at 9 o'clock coming in, we see, and this is right before the open, we see the short-term trend leading line and histogram turning green and positive. The long-term trend is not quite there yet. So this is a trade that we could take a little bit more speculatively, and a few minutes later, about 3 or 4 bars later, once we see the long-term trend closing bullish, that's a point where we think the actual trade could continue in a more bullish fashion, which it did. So taking that hypothetical trade, this is something I was going over live with the user at the time. That's about a 5-point move to the upside. Entry at 9 a.m. We want to keep holding that trade long as we continue closing outside the cycle, meaning the force is still up. When we see a couple things, red price bars and closing back within the cycle, that's a good indication that we're likely to see some either consolidation or more pullback. That's a good place to either tighten a stop significantly, be more cautious with your profit, or go ahead and close your trade. That was about a 5-point move. We see a minor pullback that we're not as interested in because of the fact that the long-term trends on all time frames are still positive throughout this entire period. So while you absolutely can take a shorter term bet using maybe a 5-minute, a 3-minute, a 1-minute, you want to make sure that if you do enter short in this scenario, you're really looking for a point or two, or even just a few ticks rather than a multiple point trade, because you're really trading against the trend at this point. Another trade that we see at 11:15 is another long based on the 5-minute, and that's about a 3 3/4 point trade, give or take. I like to place an order, a limit order, right at the close of that bar using the chart trading technique. But taking this trade, we also see the leading line moving back out of the histogram, showing force. The long-term trend has stayed positive. We're still positive using the SmartLine cycle identification and the long-term trend identification. So this is another trade to take and to watch. As long as we have green price bars closing outside of the cycle, it's okay. This is in the direction of the dominant trend, so we want to let it work. Closing inside the cycle with red price bars is telling us that we're likely to see more consolidation, which you can see. And these trades were ultimately highlighted with the DVAN velocity signals indicator, which is also available on the TradeStation trading app store. Last trade of the day in the direction of the trend before I go over one that's not is currently going on. And this is not closed yet, but it's close enough to the end of the day where I would be looking to probably exit. But this is just about a 1-point move in the positive side. The 5-minute had moved down below the long-term trend, but had crossed up simultaneously with the short-term trend histogram going green, the leading line moving up, and the cycle moving back into a buy cycle. So this is enough, because the longer-term trends are positive, to take a trade in that direction. So those are 3 confirmed trades in the direction of the longer-term trend today. Another trade setup that is kind of a secondary setup, but a good one to the short side that was today, was around 1:55 Eastern time. You can see that we have a velocity sell signal. We also have a velocity sell signal at 1:30 on the 15-minute, which is telling us it's likely to move down. Once again, we don't have big expectations for a very bearish move, but more so just a move down to support. Where we find our support levels can be on the 15-minute or the 60-minute. So, for instance, if we enter a short trade, we want to see a lot of confirmation entering a trade against the trend. So, looking at the velocity signals, red price bars, red histogram, a really good signal is when price bars go back green, histogram stays red, and then price bars turn back red while you're converging into a selling cycle. So you can see that happened here at 1:55. This would be another opportunity to take a short, with the expectation that you're probably only looking for a shorter term trade. Where we would look if we entered at 1:55 p.m. a short trade, this is around 2183.25. There are places to look for targets, especially on the 60-minute. You can see at that time we were about here, 2183.25. So a natural point of support within these buying and selling cycles, the first support would be the top line of the cycle. Major support is the midline, because we're still very bullish long-term trend in all scenarios. We're really just looking for the first level of support. So if we took the short trade at 1:55, a very natural level of support would be around 2181. You can see that's about where the trend line is at that point. So a trade from 2183 to around 2181 is about 2 points. That's where we would either just take our trade and say that's all we were looking for because it's not in the long-term direction of the trend, or significantly tighten our stop once again. These are some examples of how we can come into the day with DVAN SmartLines, really formulate our plan. Where's the major trend direction? Where are our points that we could enter, our points that we could exit, and our main points of support and resistance to look for targets and trend continuations on the longer term time frames. Hope this helped. Once again, these are all available on the TradeStation Trading App Store. I'll provide a link in the bottom of the video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to have a personal webinar. Thank you.